P1744, body number 2, Caucasian male, late 40s. Mr. Quental Smith, misadventure. Today's investigation, due to department cutbacks, is being performed at home. Right, time for some incisive commentary. Cut number 1.
You alright?
Yeah?
Must have been something you ate.
Yeah. Do you remember food?
Some of it, yeah. Oranges.
That's not a food, that's a colour.
Oh yeah.
What this?
Hello and welcome back to Comparison Fan Labs. My name is Jacob Overy, and on today's show, as always, we will be determining how much fun there is in the video games you've bought and how best to squeeze that fun through the cabling and AV equipment you've purchased to ensure you're legally getting the fun that you deserve. Today we'll be peering behind the foggy curtain of up-piped compression in the case of Dizzy the Egg versus the People 2014. Very murky case legally, lots of people quite angry, certainly not something to yoke about. Moving on your left you'll see footage of the original release running on the Sony Plumstead Dry. On the latter side, the HD revisitation of the series, which, as you would expect, has full rights for access on bank holidays and weekends. Notable jaglets of fuzz on the left, whilst the right contains more edges, whilst appearing to have fewer. Round 1 of comparisons, and it's a straight juice. Run through the ASJFNX filtration system, however, we can see now that the modern architecture runs smoothly on an underlying core of fish, whilst the nastier polygons of the older console are unavoidably haunted by forest. So even under circumstances where, like myself, you find yourself a very big fan of aquariums, it's difficult to find a way to just...
Pop-Tarts!
Sorry?
Do you remember? Pop-Tarts!
I mean, that question just seems unacceptable. They're musicians, they deserve respect.
No, they're sweet and hot and you put them in your mouth.
Mate, you're talking about food.
Yes.
It's a food.
People had them for breakfast.
Of course they did.
They came in these cute little boxes. There was something I wanted to watch. Wilmot's Warehouse is a game where you play Wilmot, this is Wilmot, and you run a warehouse, this is your warehouse. Periodically, your co-workers will show up at a service hatch and ask you for shoes or flowers or axes, and you need to serve them against the clock. And I don't want to spoil anything, but if you work hard enough, management might just reward you with a motivational poster. But that's not the whole game. You see, as the lord of this logistical fiefdom, you end up designing the warehouse. You receive new stock all the time, but this includes new kinds of stock. So how are you going to store everything? Thin columns, fat squares? How do you move them around? You're given so little guidance and so many tiny, precious options. It's a game that leaves you to invent your own game. Is your game too hard? Great news! That's entirely your fault. Better news, you can fix it. Every handful of deliveries offers up a quiet time where you can tidy your mess, open up corridors, and, most importantly, in slowing your warehouse's steady transformation into a Kafkaesque hell of your own making, you can reorganize. Or, if you're a bad enough dude, you can not reorganize and rely on your memory.
Here comes the science. The human brain stores two different types of memories: episodic memory, which is what we've experienced, and semantic memory, the information that tells us what things are. Episodic memories are what we think of as memories. We play them back in our heads like tiny films. I've been collecting sharks from this spot for the last 2 hours. This is where the sharks live. Whereas semantic memory is an invisible library, a hard-coded encyclopedia of connections and stuff. Do you know what a shark is? I'm proud to say that I do, which means that the sharks should all live here. And as Wilmot's warehouse literally offloads more and more junk into your warehouse, as if it was taking a poo in your mind palace, well, the game becomes a cloudy cocktail of episodic and semantic memory. For ages, I thought these little tubes were glue. But now it's so obvious. They're sun cream. Put them with the beach stuff. Except, in my mind, they're still glue, even though I know that's not what they are. Maybe that doesn't matter. Beach glue. Probably the least desirable type of glue, but most popular models of memory storage envision semantic memory as a web, a network of connected nodes of information that we zip around to find the kinds of meaning that we need. And there's evidence to suggest that this theory is true. The semantic proximity effect is a phenomenon that observes that if we're already thinking about buses, for example, and let's be honest, who isn't? Those big metal boys are hot. If you're thinking about buses, then it will take you significantly less time to then respond to queries about cars than it will, for example, profiteroles. Because unless you've had a particularly unexpected, sticky commute, you're unlikely to connect the two. But what's beautiful is, you might. This map of concepts is homegrown, and while most of us will make connections that are mostly the same, we all have our own strange shortcuts, our own semantic quirks. Everyone's warehouse is different. Speaking of which, this is mine. You've got nautical symbolism up here, then onto straight up boat stuff, watery things, the beach, beachwear, barbecue stuff. On the other wing, we've got jewels. Armor stuff goes here. Not sure what these are or where they go.
This is my rich people area, full of diamonds, phones, and what I thought were pearls, but I think now are oven knobs. Also, flags, because countries use flags, and countries are rich.
And we've got these red pie charts. They live next to the sun, because circles are friends.
This is where I keep the bad things. So we've got stealth bombers, nuclear explosions, and Marmite. Also, inkwells? These really belong with office supplies, but they've been here for so long that I can't move them now.
No, Quins! This whole warehouse lives or dies on a system. You can't just start creating exceptions to the rules. Or maybe you can. Once you move an item from one context to another, you've then created competing memories that could bring this whole enterprise crashing down. And that's brilliant! I can't think of another memory game that actively mirrors the realities of memory, letting you build a sensible system brick by brick, only to have it riddled with nuances and strange synaptic connections that don't really make sense but you happily just work with.
We should also talk about geography. There comes a point in everyone's career in warehousing where you're fulfilling some giant order of eyes or dog bowls, which are kept in the rich people area, obviously, and the seconds are ticking away, and you can't fit them through the narrow corridor that you made, you big square idiot! Suddenly, you're recontextualizing this puzzle, your warehouse, in terms of runways, overflow zones, and proximity to the service hatch. And my favorite of all, later on in the game you unlock a robot assistant who'll shelve things things for you, which is a massive relief. But then you realise he doesn't stock quite the same way that you would. He's a liability! Get him out of here! After a couple of hair-raising orders, you'll realise that this is a game of not just organising, but tidying up. Which sounds awful, but tucked away in a dark corner of Wilmot's warehouse is a vital design lesson. Humans prefer overcoming obstacles that are a consequence of our own choices. Rather than being frustrated, I was laughing to myself every time I tried to pull a wide load of boxes through a gap, like a dog travelling through a doorway with a stick, because I made the doorway and I made the stick. This also means it doesn't matter if Wilmot becomes too easy, because you made it easy, you big square genius. You are probably always going to deliver your boxes on time, but that's not what failure looks like. Failure is having to go the long way around a pillar or temporarily forgetting where you keep the pens, resulting in a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. We're not going to let that happen again.
But really, you're never gonna fail. And that leaves the game feeling reassuring rather than aspirational. Because it's great that games can provide an escape, a way we can reliably find a sense of control in a world that's often baked in chaos. But it's even better when you play a game because that's the exact experience you want to have, but what you get is all the more wholesome. A reminder that providing things are mostly in the right place, you'll work it all out. It'll all be okay. Sometimes you'll feel overwhelmed, like you're in deep water, surrounded by sharks, but you aren't. The sharks don't live there anymore, they're over with the animals, just next to the butterflies. Where the hell did I put sharks with butterflies? Oh gosh, fine, we'll move them back. The fez. Is the fez a beach hat? No, it's not a beach hat, you racist. Look, let's just start a new section that's 100% hats. I don't think I've got room for that. I'm gonna have to make room, okay? Because I am not running a warehouse with racist hats.
Kevin, that was fascinating. It's remarkable still that adding LED lights to the inside of your computer does physically make it better, but the statistics on the matter don't lie. Now, however, it's time for our head-to-head test, sponsored, of course, by Frinco. The Frinco bangometer is a remarkable piece of equipment. We use it for the majority of our tests, and it's available in fetching colours such as lime green, green, forest green, unripe mango green, other green, and green. It's time to head to the Fun Lab's Fun Lab.
On today's head-to-head test, version 6.38 for HDMI cables. There's a lot of them on the market, but which one gets the biggest bang for your buck? We'll be plugging them directly into the Frinco bangometer to find out. It's over there. Whether you're engaging in leisure time with a Trembox 9G, or considering something a bit more powerful in the form of a horizontal SAS station, it's important to buy a modern cable that, technically speaking, does all of the things, but is also properly attuned to your console. These HDMI cables have both been given the FunLab standard of 7.2 days to soak up the latent energies of these consoles. So, without further ado, let's begin. And just put that in there, and that's right, just thumb it in. Ooh, you're quite dirty, aren't you? Oh, you really are a very, very dirty bowl of soil.
Shoes. Each of these shoes contains the skin of 22 lizards, but how did they get in there? I'll tell you how. They're hammered into place by artisans.
Games always bang on about carving your own destiny, but in truth, you walk the same path as everyone, but sometimes you're allowed to customize the shoes. And if you're now wondering, hey, isn't carving your own shoes just as cool, if not more cool, than carving your own destiny, then you've evidently forgotten that you're talking about clogs. Hello, yes, is that police? My video is being watched by a boring bastard. So now we've objectively identified that clogs are bad, let's talk about one game that fully understands how to make shoes and the rest of your clothes a fully integral part of the journey rather than just baubles to please along the way. Monster Hunter. Kill a thing, turn it into a snazzy jacket, wear that jacket while you murder its mum. The subtext might be grim, but the world is full of life and colour, a seemingly endless rabbit hole of tips and tricks and strange secrets to master. I can't think of another series that uses mechanical detail quite so deftly in service of conjuring up a world. But the beating heart of Monster Hunter is built not on the back of gigantic dragons, but from the carefully sowed seeds of the deeply mundane. The tiny details you learn as a player gradually combine to form an image of a person just doing a job. And that's why the slow, methodical pace of these games is so enchanting. It isn't because it makes the game harder, less forgiving, though both of those things are true. The appeal isn't masochistic cruelty, it's the sensation of learning a trade. Working hard against constantly unpleasant odds to carry out a task with tools that often just aren't quite up to it. And plot twist here, the game you're watching footage of now isn't the game I'm talking about. Monster Hunter World is a fabulous invention, framing some of the delights of this incredible series in a way that's allowed it to break through, to find the wider audience it truly deserves. But in doing so, perhaps the greatest strength of the series has been lost. The sense of struggle that forces you to devise long-term strategies. This is Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate on the Nintendo 3DS. I have played this game for a whopping 100 hours, maybe. It is frequently brutal, it can often be a grind, and I absolutely adore it with every inch of my being. Monster Hunter World, in contrast, is far less harsh and much more generous. But this kindness comes with an invisible cost. Progress within the game is fast and consistent, and difficulty spikes are rarely too sharp. Leveling up your hunter rank here is far more akin to leveling up in most video games. Every 2 or 3 missions, you'll clearly see progress. You're constantly unlocking new things to do. And I'm here to tell you that actually that isn't cool. Excuse me, Mum, who is this man on YouTube telling me that new things aren't cool? Hear me out here, okay? Look, traditionally, Monster Hunter treats these hunter ranks not so much as signifiers of progress or skill, but as individual chapters in the story of you. There is also a story within the game, sure, but that's not the story you really carry away with you. Those stories are always the same. There's a mission to go and fight a literal potato. Oh no! There's a dragon here! Run away. And then the prowess of this big bad is hammed up by the supporting cast. You murder some other stuff to get better gear, and eventually face off against the creature you originally had to quickly sprint away from when you'd only turned up to fight a potato. It's an arc that hasn't changed, but it's the pace of it that matters. In previous games, these nasty encounters would be presented as walls in the distance, with a whole ecosystem of other things to tackle in preparation for that. As the game progressed and the difficulty got harsher, your options for routes towards progression became broader. These bottleneck points where you'd be tested remained the same for everyone, but the path that led to your success was one carved just by you. This is Monster Hunter's hidden majesty. Grinding only really feels like a chore when it's something that doesn't seem like an option. Monster Hunter's inherent breadth gives you the space to invent your own homework, to send you spiraling off on a chain of tasks that adapts and mutates. Well, I need this stuff to do that, but then I need that to get that, and then if I've got that, then I can kill this guy in about 10 hours. I once spent 20 hours fighting a tiny electric horse with a hammer, and let me tell you, fighting a horse with a hammer is hard. I arguably shouldn't have to tell you that, and the fact that you've inquired about it has me frankly quite worried. But, Your Honour, I was using that hammer for good reason. I needed a special piece of loot that only came from breaking that tiny horn, and I needed quite a lot of it. Because then, I'd have this amazing lightning sword. But first, I needed to go and get some armor to defend against the paralysis that this horse bastard causes, so I'd spent ages fighting the mighty Zinogre, a lightning dragon dog who becomes vastly dangerous the moment you give it just a few seconds to breathe. But if you're going to fight a Zinogre that many times, then you may as well make it easier. Get yourself an ice weapon. Which one of those ice weapons should I choose? You see, the problem is, Monster Hunter World is flashy and grand, but the smoother ramp of difficulty to ease players in never evolves into something that really spikes. There are rarely any challenges that you feel you truly need to go away and prepare for. And the process of crafting weapons and armor is far less grueling than it has been in the past. Now, no one likes Bad Billy Expert rocking up to tell everyone that easy games are bad, but fewer monsters to fight in the game means a potential wardrobe and arsenal that feels far less broad. And honestly, leveling up your hunter rank was never really the progress that players cared about. It was getting access to new fights and new areas that would allow you to unlock more stuff in this unknowably big tree of equipment upgrades. This massive, mysterious web of things you can craft is the engine that makes Monster Hunter raw. You're collecting the shell of this creature to make an armor set that will help you then do this, but along the way, you find a special rare gem. You can make that if you first collect this. Wow, change of plan, guys. We're gonna do this. And the whole time you're doing this endless cascade of mutating work, you've never at any point been told to do any of it. You're always making your own homework. If the game had at any point instructed me to kill one monster 15 times, I would have told it to go and live in a bin. But it didn't. The scope of the work was something I defined myself, and that massive electric sword I made? When I finally finished the work behind my arduous plan, I couldn't remember what I wanted the sword for. I think I had a plan involving some kind of wyvern, but honestly, I've got no idea. But that's fine, because in Monster Hunter, the work is the story. And this is something that the most recent game strangely lacks, and a lot of this does come down to difficulty. But let's be absolutely clear, this isn't about cruelty, this isn't about gatekeeping, this isn't about the idea of earning your worth through toil. Because Monster Hunter isn't a game where you overcome difficulty with skill. You overcome it by learning, by thinking, by pondering, by planning. And when you smooth some of that away, well, it robs you of the context that makes the victories feel like they were yours. Both figuratively and literally, when you kill that dragon, you'll be wearing the same shoes as everybody else.
Got the same shoes as almost everyone else. I got the shoes blues.
What was the number for those lizard shoes again?
Absolutely not. I don't remember. I absolutely don't remember.
On today's FunLab Human Test, we invited teenager David to play 18 rounds of Frozy Crane's Battlegrounds.
Baby, I hear the blues are calling. Tossed salad and scrambled eggs.
We've been watching him closely for a number of hours. Now it's time to reap that data. David, on a scale of 1 to 140, how exciting would you say this game is making you feel?
About 57. It's all right.
David says the game isn't really exciting. But we think that he's lying.
David has never been so enthralled or excited. in all of his life.
His arms are sweaty, his fingers weak, his eyes heavy. This photograph of his heart rate looks a bit like spaghetti. How on earth is it that a boy with such a tiny mouth has been born with the capacity to only tell such enormous lies? Well, we'll be back next week with the genome sequencer and some tiny pieces of David's parents. Now, though, it's time to go back to our HDMI FanLabs head-to-head test. Clarinet, both figuratively and literally. And passing the ball over to you.
The results of our HDMI test truly speak for themselves. There's only one HDMI cable here. It won't leave you looking like an absolute idiot.
Do you think we should get some new cables for our setup? Just, everything looks a bit fuzzy on there, doesn't it?
Oh, I like that. It's got character.
Of tax evasion. We'll have more on this story as it evolves.
I think it's just some people might look at it and think,
What other people? There's no one else here. We've looked.
Should he get away with it because he's a Gyarados? Should he? Should he get away with it because he's a big fish? Well, I don't know, but we can't catch him.
When you were young, you were the king of Dragon Pass, oh, and how you built a Tula tumbling through the trees. You burned that man alive and murdered all those sheep.
Let's talk about being a ruler of men and women and children and ducks. King of Dragon Pass is a 1999 game about being the chieftain of an Iron Age clan and is the best game ever made about being a leader. It's set in the old 1970s fantasy world of Glorantha, which makes Dungeons & Dragons look as twee as the expanded McDonald's universe. King of Dragon Pass has dragons, but no mythical heroes to kill them. It has gods, but asking for their help is at best ridiculous and at worst ridiculous and someone dies. Before you've even started playing, you have to decide if your tribe practices slavery of its own underclasses, which you inevitably won't do on your first playthrough, but might on your second, because in a recession, some people are, because when you have an economy that is, we all have to make sacrifices. But if Glorantha is relentlessly unfair, it's also familiar. It's a world of the strong picking on the weak, of governors making any decision to keep their people safe. Pluck away the film of fantasy on this game and you'll find our world. A pungent stew of humanity made palatable by talking ducks. And it shouldn't be this way, but in feeling plausible, this game feels revolutionary. I'm going to shock you now. Did you know most video games are power fantasies? Crazy, I know. But what you might not have thought about is that this desire to empower players can sometimes undermine a game's fiction. Historically, the thing about civilizations is that they have lifespans. Whether it's the Egyptians or the Mayans or the British Empire, peoples rise up and display vainglorious dominion over their environment, but then always flounder and fail and are replaced. But Civilization, the video game, only simulates the first half of this, with players building up one race of people forever in a retelling of history that's insidious in how false it is. Teaching us that if a race has power today, then it's probably special, which is bollocks. But let's get back to leadership, and let's talk about Mass Effect, the game that before King of Dragon Pass, I thought was the best game about being a boss.
How do you feel about being assigned to the Normandy?
A game where you choose to be a paragon or a renegade, or if you've not played the games, a Captain Picard who speaks with his mouth, or a Captain Kirk who speaks with his fists and sometimes his mouth, but honestly he's not very happy about it. This is a game that defines itself by giving you tough choices. Will you kill your nationalist girlfriend or a boring man? Will you exterminate an entire species? Arguably, in your defense, they are dicks. All the decisions in Mass Effect are badass, but they're a power fantasy. Mass Effect asks, which of these correct decisions do you like, as if you were filling out your interstellar OkCupid profile. And this undermines the game's core pitch of being a leader for two reasons. For one, leaders don't act to express themselves, you're thinking of despots. Leaders are chosen for their character as an expression of their society. But most importantly, Mass Effect undermines itself because yes, being a leader is about making all the big decisions, but it's also about being held responsible for your actions. And comfortably for the game's writers, designers, and players, Mass Effect's planet-hopping narrative means you rarely have to think about the nuances of your calls. Hey, I've made a choice that changes the very structure of your society. I hope it works out. I'm off to see if I can bang Thane. Oh, Thane, choose me to bear your leathery eggs.
Stop it! Stop it! This is so unprofessional. How is it that a game about being a leader doesn't so much as give you a slap on the wrist for jiggling bits with most of your subordinates? Sure, you'll airdrop into sticky alien situations as some sort of grand moral arbiter, but there's never any question about your own abuse of power. It's as if no one could possibly expect you to make the ultimate sacrifice of keeping your trousers on while you're at work.
I'm in space.
Yes, and the exploration of the inappropriate nature of captain-crew relationships is another reason that Sunless Sea is amazing. Anyway, what makes King of Dragon Pass different is simple. The leader doesn't get to make decisions any more than a cook gets to make a burger. The leader has to make decisions, and vitally, you're only called upon to make decisions not at fun forks in the road, but where there is no road. Perhaps a disreputable poet has been caught in the woods making love to a local woman. Oh, a woman already engaged to a man from a clan you're currently allied with, and that alliance has turned a bit frosty recently. What do? Well, you probably start by talking to your advisors. Here, the vibe mostly seems to be, don't worry about it, keep quiet, be cool, let the diplomatic wedding go ahead as normal. Although on the side, we've got a couple of people who seem paranoid that this might not be the last we'll hear of the matter, and spoilers, it probably won't be. I mean, this guy seems to think there's no problem at all, but he's a legal expert, and maybe this case needs a softer touch. And not only is this advice frequently imperfect, sometimes it will just be flat out bad. Maybe you filled your council with arrogant warriors to try and make sure you don't lose any more wars. Do warriors know a great deal about livestock disputes? Probably not, no. Will they be thrilled to give you adamant advice on the matter? Absolutely, yes, always. Understanding who is advising you on what is vital, and it's such a realistic aspect of leadership. You have to trust the opinions of your advisors, but you also need to recognize when they're biased or wrong. You've even got those who worship the trickster god Irmau. Keep one as an advisor in your circle and you'll occasionally receive invaluable help, particularly when dealing with the occult or the impossible. Is there a dragon on the horizon? Send me to go and chat with them. But mostly, trickster worshippers just give you awful advice and behave like unbelievable dickheads. But mostly that's fine, because those in your clan appreciate that being a dickhead is just part of their religion. In a setting that's familiar or only half as strange, you'll rarely even listen to advice. Go with your gut, it'll be fine. Here, it will not be, because this world is absolutely bonkers. How many warriors should you send to reliably kill a couple of undead soldiers? That many? Too few, everyone is dead. Should you negotiate with a talking fox? Well, come on now. Should you take in refugees on the run from a dangerous foreign sorcerer? It's miles away, you're probably fine. How dangerous could they possibly be? It's not as if a decision like that could come back and bite you or ruin you literally years later. And learning what matters and what doesn't in this world is only half the puzzle. Sometimes you'll have to make bad decisions purely because people are really pissed off. And you can always do the right moral thing, but the warriors of the clan will think you soft. You can rule with aggression, retaliate, fight, but you'll make new enemies at every turn. Folk will grow tired. Bravado is fresh and exciting in the spring, but people will still want to eat in the winter. So maybe just avoid conflict and work towards peace? Now your armies are bored, and you definitely don't want that. And while you're never short of people offering advice, the responsibility and consequences always come back to sit with you. No one cares why you did the thing. They're just absolutely furious you did the thing. And that, friends, is leadership. It isn't about being the figurehead of an endless empire, or pressing a button that commits mass genocide but then looking out of the window and taking a moment to feel sad. Leadership is failing to properly adjudicate a dispute involving the ownership of cows. It's doing the wrong thing and getting away with it. It's doing the right thing, standing up for what is good and moral, and watching as people overthrow you in their fear.
Do you remember being afraid of things?
What, like Pop-Tarts?
No. Why would you be afraid of Pop-Tarts?
Well, they were very hot.
Okay. Can we watch more video game television?
No, that's it.
Well, when will there be more?
I don't know. It could be ages.